Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber. If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now.
Hi and welcome everyone to this Uncovered podcast. I'm Estelle Vasudevan subbing in for Beram Kazi today, and with me is Jarrod Kimber. Today we're going to talk about...
You're not subbing in, you're just doing the podcast. What do you think this is? You've done one intro in your life and you've already lied to the people.
Anyway, today we're going to talk about the Women's Future Tours program, which was released by the ICC last week for the years 2025 to 2029. The big topic, as our title would suggest, is the increase in number of tests that will be played during this cycle. So 17 tests, if I'm not mistaken, in 5 years. 5 different countries will be playing test cricket during this period. The big one, I suppose, I want to start on a positive note. West Indies getting a test for the first time since 2004. So we're going to see Hayley Matthews and hopefully Deandra Dottin, Stephanie Taylor getting into the whites for the West Indies. They'll be playing Australia in 2026, England in 2027, and then South Africa in 2028. A big move for them.
If I'm not mistaken, that means that the Netherlands women have played a test match since the West Indies last played a test match. Is that right?
I'm not sure, but there was some kind of stat like that, right? Completely unusual or unexpected team having played Test cricket after the West Indies.
Yeah, I think, I don't know who they played. Was it maybe South Africa they played in, like, I want to say 2007 or somewhere around then. So it kind of, you know, if you're thinking, this seems a bit weird. It is a bit weird. The West Indies women haven't come from that. How has this happened? Because we've heard a lot of moaning about New Zealand not playing a test match from the women's cricket community, but also from people in New Zealand just going, why are we not playing a test? I was on New Zealand radio last week, stirring the pot as much as possible. Why has the West Indies suddenly decided to do it? Because I just haven't heard much about the West Indies playing a test.
Yeah, it's an unusual one, right? Even I don't think a lot of people were expecting it to come out of the West Indies because there are so many other issues, I suppose, that are going on with, funding, and players talk about the facilities they have and all of that. And then suddenly you throw in, okay, they're playing not one test, but they're scheduled to play 3 tests across this cycle. So really unusual happenings. I guess maybe it is kind of like, what people want for New Zealand is that you want your great players to get that opportunity, right? And maybe it's something like that when it comes to Hayley and Deandra and Stephanie.
And where are these, home or away?
They're playing Australia and England at home. I think South Africa is away.
So, I mean, that means they're paying for it. Which I know that sounds weird, but I think that's part of the reason New Zealand's not doing it, right? Is because they're like, no, we don't want to pay for it. Whereas it's like the West Indies have come in and been like, no, we're going to pay for 2 of these matches. I mean, to be fair, I've been watching the Super 50 in the last couple of weeks. And like last night I was watching the Super 50. Who was it? Combined Campuses 11 versus Windward Islands. And when the ball was hit, it was in a stadium. I can't remember what ground it was in. But the echo was so loud because there wasn't another human being in the stadium. There was no commentary on it, right? And I was thinking to myself, if you could do this, you could definitely do women's tests without... Let's not take the piss here. Which is why New Zealand should be doing it as well. But no, look, it's great. It's a step in the right direction. And also, I feel better about it not being a token one. Do you know what I mean? It's not just one and done. It's multiple, and that for me feels like someone's made a decision of no, it's time to start this thing. Let's go.
That's what's interesting to me as well, because like there has not been any real indication from the ICC that they want women to, like, test cricket to be a proper fixture in the women's game, right? It's been basically up to the boards to decide if they want to play or not. Which brings me to New Zealand. Like, there's been a lot of conversation about New Zealand, right? And about why aren't they playing test cricket. And as you mentioned, like, the financial part of it is a big part of the conversation, is that they don't want to host because they have to pay for it. But also, I think there was a piece of news maybe about a year ago or a few months ago saying that there had been offers by teams like England to host them, and they still said no.
Yeah, that's the one I don't understand. Is that because then they think they have to host back at home and it's still going to cost? Do you know what I mean? Are they worried that then they have to go back and do it themselves afterwards? Are they being locked into a cycle they don't want to get involved with? But yes, I think that's the bit I don't understand personally. Is fine, you don't want to host, but you're being offered one. I just think with Leah Tahuha, Sophie Devine, and Susie Bates at the age they're at, honestly, New Zealand cricket just owes them a test. Like, this is, I would very rarely say this about players because, it's not the way that we look at cricket and everything else, but they are owed a test for what they have done. Even more so now that they've won the World Cup. Even if they had, even if they hadn't have won the World Cup, it's like they had done everything that has been asked of them. Susie Bates on her own has lifted the profile of women's cricket in that country. Leah Tahuhu, being like the stalwart and coming in and bowling the bouncers and everything. She's put her body through all that sort of pressure. And Sophie Devine, as the all-rounder trying to do everything for that team, the current leader, and everything else. They just owe them a test. I'm sorry, there's no other way of putting it. Like, it just needs to happen. So it's really disappointing that New Zealand's done this again. I don't know what we need to do to kind of, I don't want to say force it through, but I don't know what we need to do to like get the pressure on. Maybe this is something we should have done when they had a female prime minister. And we should have started it then. But it just feels like there must be something. Like, if you're in New Zealand and there's like people, we need to start putting their emails up, like at the sports minister's email address or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if there's something that we can legitimately help, we will try and help, because it's bullshit, Estelle. It's complete bullshit.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons, I suppose, is that they increased their match fees, right? So they equalized it. And now that means if they do play a test, they have to pay them, I think it's 10,000 New Zealand dollars or US dollars? 10,000.
Yeah, if it's 10,000 New Zealand dollars, it's not a lot of money. Hey!
No, it's USD.
But I would hope that is not the reason they are not doing this. I would hope that it's not about how much they have to pay the players. Because that's the case. That's almost the worst possible situation of equal pay, but we're not actually going to pay it to you because we're not going to get you to do the work, right? Like, that would be the worst possible thing. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think money is ultimately the reason. And I do think that is what it comes down to. It'd be really interesting, and anyone from New Zealand cricket is more than welcome to come on and talk to us about this. But it'd be really interesting to know what they think the future of women's cricket is, because if South Africa and the West Indies are thinking it's women's test matches, it's very interesting that New Zealand don't. Like, what, how does that help? And I don't know how you feel about it. I know women's test matches don't make a lot of money, but they do some really interesting things. They give you, like, coverage for multiple days. You usually do get more coverage for a test match than you do for a one-day series, just because traditionally that's where cricket journalism always covers things quite well. And I see it as more of a festival of women's cricket. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're almost investing in a promotional event in a way that for a T20 game or a one-day game, it doesn't quite work, because you play a game, then you have days off in between, and then you come back and have another game. So I almost think of, I don't know, it feels very weird to me that first-class teams all around the world can go to club venues, make it into a first-class venue, play a game there, have lots of people come along, and it's a really nice day out, or 4 days out, and that can't happen in New Zealand for a women's test match. It's just, it's very, very crap.
Yeah, and it essentially means, like you mentioned, given the ages of those three players, that if it doesn't happen in this cycle, it's not going to happen in their careers, right? And I think that is what is disappointing. And I think a lot of people speak about Susie Bates and Sophie Devine, Leah Tahu, what they've done for the game. And you don't want to say, you don't necessarily have to believe that, things are deserved in sport, but like, especially after what they've done in the last month, right, at the World Cup, you'd think that there would be at least a bit more receptiveness towards something like that happening. I've just been trying to think of why not, but especially because they've been offered the option of playing away from home, and that's not happened. So unfortunately, it looks like we might not see those three in whites in their careers. Hopefully, it's something that changes eventually, and we do see New Zealand in Test cricket maybe in the next cycle, unless something changes in this one.
It's still possible that a Test match is added during the cycle, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
suppose
saying
it
it will
is.
be, but it's possible.
Yeah, I suppose it is because, like, so I was recently I was speaking to Chamari Atapattu, and she was saying that SLC is keen to even start a 2-day tournament. And there's only one reason you start a 2-day tournament, right? It's because you want to play, or you're thinking of playing Test cricket. That hasn't happened, and I haven't heard anything else from anyone else about 2-day games in the domestic calendar. But there does seem to be some thought given to it by other boards as well.
Yes, I mean, quite clearly, people are thinking about it now. In fact, it seems like every board's thinking about it except for New Zealand right at the moment. And just to get back to your point before, and we both kind of made it, but I just want to point out what I think what we're trying to say is you hear a lot in cricket, this player's a legend and they deserve to, finish their career where they want and everything else. And in sport, I think I generally disagree with that, right? Not that I'm saying people don't deserve that, but that's not how it works. The best team should be picked and everything else. This is such a different situation because there is no reason why during their career they haven't been allowed to play a Test match. And so, if it feels like they have done a service. I think in the future, New Zealand cricket will make more money because of women's cricket, and that will largely be on the back, as that violent sneeze comes out of me. I think that will largely be on the back of the pioneers who have changed the game for them. And look, I think we did the Red Inca with Susie Bates, and I felt really bad because I essentially brought Susie. Susie loves talking about batting. And I wanted to talk to her about batting and how much women's cricket had changed. But I essentially needed her to tell me how sad she was that she hadn't played the Test, right? And, and I really hated doing that, but I really wanted to illustrate to people how ridiculous this is and how much she thought not playing Test matches actually affected their team, right? And, and she brought up Annabelle Sutherland and was like, here's someone who's batting at number 8 who can face a couple of hundred balls. And, and she's like, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. So it's so important. But yeah, so the whole deserved a thing, I'm generally against that as a principle in sport. Yeah. But they just have deserved a Test. It's just ridiculous that they haven't had one. And I would have no problem with the three of them hanging around in the way that the Island players all did for their Test. Remember the Island men just hung around and it was like, then they all retired the day after the Tests. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't quite that thing, but I remember chatting to some of them during it and they were looking up and I was saying, what's next? And they were looking at me going, Jarrod, what do you think's next? We're not going to keep playing. This is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah, that would be, I wouldn't mind seeing a Sri Lanka versus New Zealand Test at the Galle International Cricket Stadium. That would be awesome. Because Sri Lanka hasn't played one since 1998 either. So,
how many Tests has Sri Lanka played?
One, and they have a 100% record.
Who did they play?
Pakistan, 1997.
So around that period, Pakistan play like a lot of Tests then because they play Ireland in the year 2000, I want to say as well.
Yeah, I think Pakistan had a few more Tests.
So that's weird. So I just want to go through this. Pakistan's never won a Test, by the way. So England has played 100. Australia's played 79. Who's third on the list?
Got to be India, right? Isn't it?
That's what I would have said. Incorrect.
Pakistan.
Nope, they've played 3.
I don't know. I'm out of guesses.
New Zealand. New Zealand
Oh,
have played 45 tests, right? So considering England's played 100, I think 45 is quite a decent amount.
yeah.
They started playing tests in 1935 and they played through to 2004. They have only won two of those tests, only lost 10 as well. So majority of their matches have been draws.
Draws.
India's played 41 with 8 wins. South Africa's played 15. I'm actually surprised South Africa's played that many as well, especially because of the apartheid. Although they played their first one in 1960, so they got some in beforehand. West Indies has played 12. First one in 1976 as well. Pakistan 3, Ireland 1, Netherlands 1, Sri Lanka 1. So it's not great for Sri Lanka that they played the same amount of test matches as Ireland and Netherlands. But also, this is worth mentioning that it's incredible the fact that Netherlands and Ireland could play women's test matches without anyone actually giving them official status. They just played test matches, right? Whereas in the men's game, you have to go through absolutely everything in order to become a test playing nation. And it was like, I remember when we were in Ireland and the Irish women were just laughing, going, we just played one. No one had to ask us.
It's actually interesting that the Netherlands one still has like official status, right? Because they're not a test playing country.
Yep. Well, that was the same with the Ireland one. I would just have assumed that it would have been scrapped off the record. So I think the Ireland one would have come under the Women's Cricket Association. What was it called? The old group that ran women's cricket before the ICC took over. But the 2007 one, the ICC were in charge of women's cricket by that stage, I think. But this is when we need Hypercourse in the comments telling us the dates. But yeah, I would have thought that one would have been under the ICC. So I think some of it has to do with the fact that there was a different group running cricket back in those days. But it was like, if I was like the Uganda women or something, I'd be like, let's just play a test and see if they tell us we can't.
What's, I think, most impressive to me is actually the drive that South Africa has. Like, they've really driven it, right? I think they're playing like 7 or 8 tests during this cycle, which is great for them because you're getting to see some of those players. Like, I would say someone like Woolward, that's kind of a format that she could thrive in, right? And you're going to see a lot of those kind of players get that, as you mentioned, the timeout in the middle against good teams. And none of these test playing teams, barring maybe West Indies, which will have a bit of a learning curve, the other teams have been playing games almost 1 or 2 a year over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. So why do you think South Africa is making this move? I mean, other than the fact that they think Wolfhard might average 70.
Honestly, it's very difficult to understand. Like, I get England, Australia, they're playing the Ashes, right? But especially because, like I said before, the ICC has not given any inkling that they are interested in developing test cricket for women, right? So it's very interesting to me that these teams, like, when you talk about finances, West Indies is probably not the richest board in the world, right? But when they're investing in test cricket, it's very interesting.
Can I give you the funnest fact? If you listen to this podcast and we started off with Netherlands played a women's test match, you're already thinking that's pretty out there. I've just looked at the history of South Africa women playing test matches, and there's a very fascinating thing here. So they played 3 tests against England in 1960, so a 3-test series. That's how much this has changed. In those days, you used to play 3-test series. 4-test series. They played 4 in that series. And I think they lost all of them. Oh no, they lost 1 and drew the other 3, right? So their next series is in 1972 against New Zealand. Do you know why that year is important?
No.
So by that stage, the men have decided not to play against the South African men because of apartheid. And New Zealand women have played a 3-test series in South Africa under the apartheid regime. So I'm going to go on this this is a double story. One, I had no idea that women's test cricket was being played during that ban. I say ban, it's not really a ban, by the way. Everyone just stopped playing them. No one actually banned them. But I do know that they tried to play they did try and play South Africa in the Women's World Cup. And in fact, they tried to get South Africa to host the Women's World Cup during the 1970s. Rachel Hayhoe Flint, not quite as progressive on racial politics as she was on gender politics, I think it's probably fair to say. But we've just said that's got to be a black spot in the history of New Zealand sport, right? That you can't give your modern team a test match, but at one stage you were willing to send a team to South Africa, apartheid South Africa, and play when the rest of cricket, like known racist right-wing cricket, still said, no, we're not going to go to South Africa and play. And the one team that went over was the New Zealand women. I'm sorry. Just give the modern women a test match and make up for the sins of the past, please. We've come up with a million different reasons. But anyway, I find that very interesting. And as I said, there is a history here. There are teams to play. So it's really good that the West Indies and South Africa, who have played about 12 or 15 between them, are doing something about this and moving things forward. West Indies have won one test match, by the way, in 1976 against India by an innings and 24 runs. That's quite a win.
And I think the part you told us about New Zealand going to South Africa, that should be one of our social steps, right? It needs to go out to the New Zealand Cricket Board, I think, because it doesn't make sense when you were willing to do that and now you're not willing to give them one test. I'm sure Australia, England would be happy to host them, right?
Yep.
Ridiculous. All right. So the next big talking point, I think, is the fact that we have a new team in the women's championship, which will be, directly competing to try and get into the World Cup in 2029. So Zimbabwe have been drafted in, but there is a bit of controversy with that because there are a couple of teams that are ranked higher than them in both formats of the game, which have been overlooked. I think because Zimbabwe are, on the men's side at least, one of the full member nations.
Yeah. Okay. So this is ODI cricket and T20 or just T20?
So women's championship essentially is only ODIs, but basically almost every tour consists of at least 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. So they would be most likely playing both. But
the actual championship itself is just ODIs. Okay. So let's just have a look at the list here. And let's have a look at the win-loss percentages of the team. So this is the last 3 years. We have here, I have Zimbabwe women played 16 games. They've won 6 and they've lost 9. They average 19 runs per wicket and they score at 3.96. So quite low on every kind of metric when it comes to batting. By the look of this, their lowest total in a game was 72, and their highest is 250. So not too bad. There's a few other teams around them. So who are the teams that people think should be in ahead of them in that championship?
I think Scotland is one.
So Scotland has played 9 games, won 6 and lost 3. I'm assuming though those games are against other teams of a similar level. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I assume it would be so. Yeah.
But Scotland's got a really good team. Like, I don't know much about the Zimbabwe women's team, but I've seen enough Scottish players like in other leagues to be like, no, there's actual proper players here, right? Who else?
Thailand.
Thai women? Yeah. Okay. So this is another associate team with incredible records in associate cricket. Anyone else?
I think those are the 2 teams that are higher than them in both formats. Then you've got like Netherlands and PNG, which are Netherlands is ranked higher in ODI cricket and PNG in T20s.
What about the Pakistan women? Are they in that competition?
Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah.
So they have a worse winning record than Zimbabwe at the moment, right? But I would assume...
But they're playing better teams, right?
Correct. So Scotland... have been blitzing teams. I think they've won, 5 of the last 6 games. But they have been playing Papua New Guinea, USA, Netherlands, and I think they lost a couple of games to Ireland. So that's fine. Thai women have been blitzing everyone, including Zimbabwe. So The Scottish one, it's harder to make a clear point on that unless you've watched a lot of cricket. And I think if you've watched a lot of cricket, it's fair to say that there's something there because there's obviously some very good players in the Scottish women's team, and they're coming through, and I think they're going to be quite good. But I think you have to make that case based on the players as much as just the record. Kind of hard to say that the Zimbabwe team is better than the Thailand team when they lost by 76 runs, 45 runs, and 6 wickets in those games so far. That was 2023, so it's a while ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a tricky one. So, what, we're doing a second letter writing campaign? Is that what you're telling me here?
No, I mean, I would want maybe 2 of those teams to be in instead of just Zimbabwe. Maybe that is the better option where you have teams like, Scotland's qualified for the T20 World Cup, right? It's obvious that there is some talent there and there is some quality there. Thailand has been kind of knocking on the door for a while now, has been one of the promising teams in world cricket over the last couple of years since making their debut at the World Cup in 2020. So if you don't give them the opportunity now, it's going to be harder for them to sustain that kind of enthusiasm and that kind of growth, right?
No, definitely. No, I'm on your side 100% with that. I think. So how many teams are in the actual trophy itself, or the championship, whatever they call it?
We have 11 teams. It was 10 last time.
Yeah. Do they all have to play each other?
No. So what happens is they have 4 away series and 4 home series. So it's they don't play every team.
So there's no reason not to bring in extra teams then, is my point.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're forcing everyone to play everyone over a period of time, I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe bring in extra teams. There's also, you could have the top 8 teams and then have the next 8 teams in another league if you want. Cricket just never does anything easy. It's like, oh, you have to make it to the top level. Oh, but it's hard to make it to the top level because if you do that, we have to play more games. It's like, can't we just have Division 1, Division 2, Division 3? Aren't we, and especially with women's cricket, are we not kind of ready for that sort of stuff as well? As you've mentioned, you've got Papua New Guinea women. I'm missing some. There's another one that I found as well. But there's plenty of other teams. Oh, Netherlands is the other one. Yeah. There are plenty of other teams to be able to make up that second division now and get to a point where you can do that. We've got obviously teams like Argentina and Brazil and the USA that are all coming through as well. Canada for a little while. Get them all playing against each other in a proper league and to go from there. So it's very, very disappointing. But I think the most disappointing thing would be if it is just because Zimbabwe's men's team are a test nation. If that's the case, I just don't see what that has to do with anything anymore.
Yeah, but I think for Zimbabwe themselves, it's a massive opportunity, right? Because you've seen so many teams like Ireland. They've beaten Sri Lanka and England in the Women's Championship in this cycle because they've had so many opportunities. So getting to play minimum 24 ODIs, and then you add the T20. Some series don't include the T20s, but when you include that, they're suddenly playing, top level nations. I think Zimbabwe is touring India as well during this cycle. So it's massive for a team coming in from that kind of second division or group of teams to then come and play with the bigger teams in the top division.
No doubt. Look, it's great. More cricket, more competitive cricket. You watched Ireland. Ireland is such a batshit crazy women's team. It really is. Watching them, I've never seen a team get itself into so many good positions and then just detonate itself. Even when it's won those close games, sometimes they've tried to be losing them at the end. It is hilarious watching them. For me, I just want to see more of that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to see more teams, competing that way at the World Cup as well. And I think the 2029 World Cup will have 11 teams, so there will be an increase of 3 teams there, so more opportunities. Another actually really, really interesting part of this FTP is there are going to be the 90s style tri-series included. So you've got You haven't seen this, right? So you've got like India, Sri Lanka, Australia playing tri-series. You've got Ireland, Pakistan, West Indies, England, New Zealand, India. So lots of little tri-series in the FTP as well. I like it. I
Of
think
course you like
it's
it.
a good move.
Because you're a 90s kid and you're obsessed with tri-series. Do you want to know why this upsets me so much?
Yes, please.
Because I'm just going to get people that are obsessed with this sort of stuff like you contacting me every week going, why don't we have tri-series in men's cricket anymore? Look, I don't think that's a bad idea for women's cricket. I actually think I think the best way forward is, you know what those associate series are like in the men's cricket, where you have like 4 teams turn up to Oman or to Canada or wherever, and they play. That's actually brilliant. It's a really good, especially as a fan, because I'm like, okay, for the next week I'm going to be able to see 4 teams. And I'll get a really good idea on all 4 teams and how they rate against each other and what their strengths and their weaknesses are. So I would almost add a 4th team to some of those series, if possible, into the future, and have like an event where everyone turns up. It's also easier to market them. Women's cricket isn't really a huge driver of local traffic, but it's a huge driver of overall global traffic, if that makes sense. So there are lots of women's cricket fans, but there aren't necessarily lots of them in Australia or New Zealand or Sri Lanka or whatever. But when those games are being played, because women's cricket fans tend to watch a lot more general women's cricket.
Lots of neutrals, right?
Yeah, and so, because they follow the women's game and their team rather than their team and the women's game. So I actually think that's a really good idea going ahead. But yeah, it's gonna cause me issues in my life, Estelle, so I'm against it.
I like it because we've got 11 teams in the women's championship, right? But they still, as they did in the previous cycle, playing only the four series at home, 4 away, right? So for a country like Sri Lanka, you're playing 24 ODIs and 24 T20s within 4 years, right?
Yeah.
You don't have those extra games that you would see maybe for an England or an Australia or India. So having series like this actually means that they're playing much more, because there are long, I think not just Sri Lanka, but like countries like Pakistan, West Indies, all those other than the big 3, they do play a lot less, right? Because they play what they have to play and they don't play many extra games. So this would be, I think, a good addition. The quadrangles are also, I think, a good idea. I think this one, Australia, India, Sri Lanka, I know for sure is just before the Champions Trophy, your favorite tournament, which will be held in Sri Lanka.
Did you see the logo?
I did.
I'm going to be honest.
That's fake or something, right? It has to be.
No, it was on their website. It was part of their release, wasn't it? Like they released an ad with that logo in it, so I can only assume that it's real. I said it to some of my friends who have worked at the ICC or do work at the ICC, going, "Did you guys lose your Canva login? Like, what the hell is this? This is horrendous." I don't know how I feel about the women having a Champions Trophy, because I've been trying to kill that tournament in men's cricket for so long, and I don't ever want to stop women playing cricket. But that might be a step too far for me, Estelle, having a Champions Trophy for women. I think I'm out. I will watch it, obviously, but I'm out emotionally. Also, 6 teams? Is 6 teams wrong? I suppose it has to be 6 teams, doesn't it?
It's 6 teams, and my understanding is Sri Lanka will only host if they qualify. So there might be, like, at the last moment, there might be a venue change. I don't know. That was how they originally put it out, that Sri Lanka hosts, but only if they make it into the top 6.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's a wild. Some of the stuff that happens in women's cricket, because there is, I'm sure Cricket Her and the women's cricket blog and all the cricket women's stuff, they get really angry, but it doesn't filter into the mainstream as much. Just how wild and wacky some of the decisions are in women's cricket. We're just like, wait, what? Why are you doing this? Yeah, do you remember when they cancelled that qualifying tournament? We're all like, wait, hey. You said that everyone had to qualify, and then you just stopped the qualifying tournament. So yeah, It's just another wild, weird thing of women's cricket. Well, how do you feel about the Champions Trophy? I mean, it's not a bad thing for women's cricket, but are people going to watch it? Like, is it really going to work? It's taken years for the men's Champions Trophy to get some traction.
But does the men's one even have traction? I don't know. I feel like
I would
it's
say
just...
no, but...
Yeah. I think it's a good thing because there aren't that many, opportunities for the smaller teams to shine. But again,
they're not
it
being
comes
invited.
back to they're not being invited to this one. So I don't know about that. I think also I have forgotten that we need to take a break at the in the middle. So before we talk about the
tournament,
tournaments,
tell people that you forgot to take the break, Estelle. You just say, but we'll have a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a six from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend.
Okay, so on the Champions Trophy, like I said, I like the idea that there is one for the women. It's going to be in the T20 format, and it also means that every year there's going to be an ICC trophy for the women. So that's a good thing, right? They've got 50 over.
I mean, I don't know if we need every year for the women or for the men, but if you're going to have it for the men, you should have it for the women as well.
Yeah, I mean, T20 World Cup every other year seems a bit too much, particularly because 2028, you're going to have the Olympics as well. But I don't know how many teams are invited there. I'm sure it can't be more than... It's not many,
is it?
Yeah.
It's 6 or 8, I think, for that as well. Look, what I find really interesting is that they've made the Champions Trophy T20.
Yeah.
And we know that they've been trying to move the Champions Trophy to T20 as well, in the men's format. And this is basically the most public way that they could prove that is going to happen. So I find it quite interesting from that. The men's Champions Trophy, I think, has been saved by the fact that the last two editions have been won by India and Pakistan, and there was an India and Pakistan final. I've really enjoyed covering those tournaments only because they're like mini World Cups, and all the teams are around and everything else, but they're not World Cups, right? And so for women's cricket, it'll be really interesting to see if it's worthwhile, and also, most importantly, if it makes money. Because if it doesn't make money, but I would probably, if I was doing it, I would have an Olympics 1 year, 50 over, in 4 years' time, I would have one Olympics, 150 over World Cup, one T20 World Cup. And then if they want to have the Champions T20, I'm fine with that. What I don't want is 2 T20 World Cups in every 4 year cycle. Like, if you're going to do it, let's just do it properly. As you said, one a year is fine, and make the Olympics one of those. Am I right in saying that the Commonwealth Games, women aren't playing in the next Commonwealth Games?
Yeah. I think they scrapped cricket altogether. So no cricket, the Commonwealth Games, which makes me think the Olympic Games, I don't know how long that's going to last, right?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, the Olympics is, and I've said this a lot, basically, cricket is going to the Olympics on the back of it's too big a sport not to be in the Olympics. And also, the Olympics are desperate to have the Indian men's team.
India, yeah.
Right? So they want another dream team, and that is the dream team that they don't have, right? They have young Brazilian footballers, and they have the American dream team in basketball. They want one other big team that is just going to flood a whole market for them, and get them, can you imagine, there'll be German and Swedish reporters and, Ecuadorian reporters covering the Indian men's cricket team, because it's going to be a huge deal to have them in the village and everything else. So I can get that, and I can get behind that, and I can understand it, but I don't understand why the Commonwealth Games are like, we don't want that. So I'm a little bit confused by that, but it's quite interesting. So we might have 2 one-off Commonwealth Games medalists. So the South African men of 1998.
Was it 8? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the Australian women of, what year was that? 2022?
2023. 23, right?
Something
Yeah.
like I don't know. I didn't pay any attention to it because I hate the Commonwealth Games as a general concept. But yes, so I think if you have one of those a year, I think that's a much better way of doing it, going ahead. And I'm okay with that. But whether the Champions Trophy sticks around, because the thing with the Champions Trophy is, look at the way they market the men's one. They just push and push and push it to be like the best teams versus the best teams, and it's like, well, that's almost exactly what the women's
Same thing.
already is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you're pruning off two sides. Like, if you were inviting 16 teams to a World Cup and you had 8 teams at the Champions Trophy, I'd be like, now it has a reason to exist.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure at the moment it has a reason to exist other than money, but I suppose, that's how all things end up existing.
No, I mean, that's my thinking as well, right? Like if you want to have a Champions Trophy with 6 teams, then your World Cup needs to have like at least 16 teams, right? So that you can justify that, okay, we have the top teams in the Champions Trophy and the World Cup is for the world. But that's not happening. So that's a bit odd.
How many teams are in the next Women's World Cup?
I think it's supposed to continue to be 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I mean, it's not too bad. There was a World Cup not that long ago with 8, wasn't there?
There was an ODI World Cup with 8, and Sri Lanka didn't qualify. Yeah, 12 teams in 2026.
I think if it's 12 and 6, I'm not the end of that. I don't think it can keep being 12 and 6 though. It probably needs to be 16 and 8.
Yeah.
14 and 8. I think going ahead. But also, I think you're going to have trouble selling everyone on this is the best versus the best concept. And maybe it doesn't need to be that, but that is how they sell the men's tournament. So it'd be interesting to see if they spin that around.
Yeah, I mean, best versus the best is interesting to me, particularly after the most recent T20 World Cup. Who was ranking New Zealand within the top 5 of that World Cup? Nobody, right?
No, exactly. Well, I suppose that makes them qualify for the next one.
Okay, so those are the tournaments that are coming up. So 2025, you have the ODI World Cup, 26 T20 World Cup, Champions Trophy in 2027, T20 World Cup again, and the Olympics in 2028, and then the 50 over World Cup in 2029. The last kind of talking point from the FTP is that they've created proper windows for the 3 major women's franchise leagues. So you've got January, February for the WPL, August for the 100, and November for the WPL has been kept somewhat free. Your thoughts on that? Because I have some questions about it.
I think the most interesting thing to start with is that when Fair Break tried to start their tournament, and there's obviously issues with Fair Break, and they've partnered with a very, very sketchy league in America at the moment. So Fair Break might be finished, but when he was trying to set up Fair Break originally, he was trying to pressurize not even trying to pressurize. He was trying to say to these boards, this is a thing, you should be doing this, and there is money to be made. And we've gone from them basically completely blackballing this one person who was telling them to do this thing, to them going, oh yeah, leagues are more important than international cricket. Like, it's such a quick switch, right? In some ways, I always thought that with the IPL specifically, that was the big mistake that they made in men's cricket, which was that, and this was on the BCCI as much as it was on anyone else, the BCCI should have just said, look, we thought about it. We would like a 2-month window. How does everyone feel about that? And it never happened, right? And it still doesn't happen, right? And I always thought that was just such a stupid, childish thing where everyone was like, sort of going, we don't need to do it. We're just going to play the tournament here, and eventually you do it. And it's just like, just ask for it, and then you can be granted it, and we can all just move on with our lives. I would like to know how this came about, and who decided it, and why it was decided. I'm not against it because I think that there is more money in women's cricket for I think women's cricket is going to grow a lot quicker with franchise leagues than it is with international cricket right now. So it might be that women's cricket ends up being more franchisey than men's cricket, in the next 4 to 5 years because of decisions like this. But this is where the money is. This allows for women outside of the major nations to also make money. So I'm very much for it, but it's a wild decision, I think.
Yeah, another one that's kind of come out of nowhere, I feel, because like you said, with the men, there have always been clashes, right? And there's never been kind of that clear thing that okay, we are not playing during this period because the IPL is going on and there'll be conflicts. What I like about it is that maybe it brings players like I don't know what Lizelle Lee's relationship with CSA is, but it brings players like that back into, do they now, reconsider representing their countries
She's not
again?
in very good form at the moment, so there's no point bringing her back.
She just hit 200s back to back, right?
I think she
So
scored
like,
100 and I think she's got 150 out of 210 runs, didn't she, the other day? Can
yeah.
I give you a funny one? A bunch of my friends were betting on that game with me, and we had bet on the score to be under 170. And she scored 150 on her own. She almost beat our bet without the rest of the team needing to play. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, we've had it with the West Indies women as well, haven't we? Right. And, I know Susie Bates said that she was close to retirement before the franchise league started popping up. So that sort of outside that major tier of women's cricket, where obviously they are getting paid, the top three teams, those other teams, South Africa, West Indies, New Zealand, need something like this. And maybe I could go out on a limb and again and just say that the women are just better at common sense decisions than the men. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit like the Women's World Cup going back, and sometimes when you watch the way that women govern sport, you do realize that instead of everyone just bitching about each other and not doing anything, which is what the men do kind of all the time, the women go, okay, what's the best decision? Let's try and work towards the best decision. And in men's cricket, it's like, well, we can't do that because I hate that, chairman. And we can't do that because that board didn't back us with something 4 years ago, right? And it feels to me that women's cricket try and make decisions that is in the betterment of the game. And there's still some issues with this. What are your issues? Because I think you've got some issues with it. What is there anything about it that bothers you?
My issues are purely, I think that this means that it's going to be the same players playing in all three leagues. I think that's my big one, is that it's a good thing for them, obviously, because like they're all going to be available for all three leagues, right? But it also means that maybe sometimes where you would have had other players from other nations get opportunities, it might not happen now. But I mean, again, like I said, it's a good thing for a group of people. Like I remember when India first introduced the kind of exhibition tournament they played instead of the IPL, they purposely scheduled it alongside the WBBL. Do you remember that? That was, I think, the first or the second edition, where there was a big beef on social media between, I think Healy said something about the scheduling because obviously she wanted to be a part of that tournament. And then, there was a back and forth. So this means that, all those players get the opportunity to be picked for all three of the major leagues. Of course, there is a CPL as well, but that doesn't have a window. So I think from their perspective, it's a good thing, but it also means that we might only see a select group of players, or the players from certain countries make it to all three of these tournaments.
Can I throw something else out there too? The PSL is eventually going to have a women's tournament.
They did have one, right?
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? I mean, what I mean is they're going to have a proper tournament. There's probably going to be some money backing it, would be my guess. I would assume that, and I don't want to throw him under the bus, but Ali Khan Tareen, I would assume, is probably someone who would put quite a bit of money into a women's tournament in Pakistan, and I think there's a couple of other people who would as well. If that's the case, do they get a window? Is this it? Are these the three windows? Are they official windows, or have they just made sure that there's no international cricket being played? Because those are two very different things. Saying that there is a window and that you can't schedule a women's international game in this period is one thing. Saying that we are going to try not to put as many women games as possible during that is something else. So I just very, very interested in that. And, because South Africa, the SA20 will probably have a league. We already have women's CPL is also a league that has some money in it. Major League Cricket in America is going to have a league. Like, how far do we take this? For women, these are all major leagues, right?
Yeah.
Pardon the pun, because I just said major league. But, so there's a part of me that goes, well, you've opened the door now. And is it just Australia, England, and India that are major? or is it something else? And that's the bit I don't know how far we go. So it seems like in general, a common sense decision, but I would like to know the specifics of what the window is and whether it's less of a window and more of we haven't covered that hole in the side of our house.
I don't. I don't know, but my guess would be that it's not officially like don't schedule anything,
Yeah.
but I think most of the top teams would prefer not to schedule anything during those periods. Particularly, I think WPL, because they would want their players to be available, right? You don't want, like, from Sri Lanka's perspective, you don't want Chamari Athapattu having to choose between playing in that tournament and representing Sri Lanka. I think she missed part of the Island series because of the 100 last time as well. So you don't want that kind of thing. And we've had like Deandra Dottins, Lizelle Lees, who have opted to retire from international cricket because of the opportunities they have in franchise cricket, right? So I guess a lot of countries would not want that to happen. But overall, again, I agree. I think it's a good idea because it opens up opportunities. And you're saying, I don't know if you've been following the BBL, right? You've got a Zimbabwean player, you've got like Scottish players playing. So a lot of those countries who aren't represented in the women's championship also have a couple of players who can get into these tournaments. And that's one of the best things, I think, in women's franchise cricket, is that you're having this kind of associate quota, right? Where you have this little loophole where you can include associate player and it doesn't count as an international.
Which of course should be in the men's game as well. And I've been writing about that since about 2008. Like it's actually, from a marketing perspective, a really silly thing, and also from a team perspective, a really silly thing not to do it. Because if you'd done that early on, a team could have got Rashid Khan in really well.
Someone from Nepal.
Yeah, and so when you are covering, the men's Big Bash, like, the Afghanistani players do incredibly well when it comes to promotions and everything else, because who doesn't want to hear the story of what this kid went through to play for the nation? And it's the same with when Ali Khan came through and he was in the CPL and we were listening to all that. So from a marketing point of view, those stories actually cut through beyond cricket marketing and they go into mainstream, right? And so I think it's a really smart move to be able to do that. And I think men's franchise leagues have made a big error in not being involved in that as well. And it just makes you look like better people. So no, I'm huge with that. I also think we need a women's league that doesn't have a local player pool to it. And so we'd probably have to start as a 4-team league, probably in somewhere like Dubai, which is obviously not ideal, but wherever you play it, 4-team league that goes for 2 or 3 weeks, which just has the best of the best. I think that's the league that women need more. I don't think the men, well, it's not going to happen with the men anyway because of the IPL.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually would be really, really helpful for women's cricket to be able to do that, and to maybe have it as a joint production between India, England and Australia. If they want to take over everything, let them take it over, but have this tournament where just the best players get picked. And you have those and sell those to owners.
Yeah, that's kind of what Fairbreak was going for, right? But they just couldn't kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Fairbreak was a little bit different when you think about it, because they were looking for talent all around the world, weren't they? They were getting people to send in videos of themselves playing cricket in random leagues and everything. So I think Fairbreak started as that. And then they realized, oh no, actually what we can be the equal opportunity, which is also great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think for women's cricket, just having a super league is probably the best thing for women's cricket right now, would be to have a 2, 3, 4 week tournament somewhere that is central, so it can be watched from, it could be played in South Africa or Zimbabwe or, UAE or India, somewhere in that sort of central time zone where it works, for Asia and for the UK audience, from that perspective. Play the game, play it out as a major tournament, and do it that way. I think that would be absolutely ridiculously good for women's cricket. And again, you could have a rule where every team has to have 2 associate players in it as well. And Also, an opportunity to train up women coaches, women physios,
Yeah.
women strength and conditioning, and all these other things. Cricket is so far behind in women having just normal jobs in the backroom stuff. Occasionally someone will come through as a woman's as an analyst, or as there's a few women physios. There aren't many women strength and conditioning people. There aren't many women who coach all that much at the moment. Just all of those sorts of things. I think it would be a really important thing. But whether getting those three boards together and making something like that works or not, especially now that the women's IPL is so big, maybe it's just too late already. But if you're going to start it, this is the time to start it and take that away. And I think one of the big problems with the franchise leagues is this idea that the players all have to come from local. I really like the idea of just having the best 11 players available to you playing.
Is that because they have to pay overseas players more?
A lot of it is to do with nationalism, right? Imagine if India had come in and said that they were going to basically do what the NBA does, or what Premier League football does, or baseball does. I think if you're starting from day one, that's a harder sell. Whereas if you go back and listen to what they were saying, no, all these young Indian players are going to be playing with these overseas legends, and they're going to be learning and everything else. I think the men's IPL will eventually not have a Indian player limit, because I don't think it needs one. There's so much talent in India anyway. And also, if you want to appeal to your local market, having Indian players is still... There's a reason why Arshdeep Singh plays from Punjab, right? Like, do you know what I mean? There's a reason why the players from Kolkata play for Kolkata quite a bit. Like, it's not an accident that those sorts of things tend to happen, right? And so that helps with your marketing anyway. The overall talent of Indian men's cricket, I think, is going to get to such a level that they'll be able to do that in the future. But yeah, I just think it's a smarter option going ahead of how to do it, and how to, it'll improve the cricket even further. So with the women, I think it's a slightly different thing. I think it's more about the fact that you can supersize this. And as you said before, let's say you have 4 teams. So we're looking at a group of 60 players. Yeah, 25 of them are going to be from Australia, right? And, so that's going to happen. And 10 are going to be from England, and 10 are going to be from India. But 5 are going to be from South Africa, and 3 are going to be from Sri Lanka, and 2 are going to be from Pakistan, and all that sort of stuff. And a couple of the Irish players, a couple of the Scottish players coming through, maybe a couple of Zimbabweans. That is a really good environment, and you allow the entire women's structure to professionalize in a system like that a little bit more. Also, all these other tournaments that exist at the moment are add-ons to the men's tournaments.
Yeah.
A women's tournament that just runs for women's cricket, I think, is a really interesting one going ahead.
Yeah, I think that's another letter for you to write. I think we've got 3 right now for people to, get behind. I think we've covered everything on the FTP. We don't have any super chats, unfortunately, but thank you to the guys in the comments. We've got Ronald Baker, the Fireball, and I can't say his name, Shara Tanked.
I never know how to say his name. He needs to send a comment in one day to tell us if it's all one word or if it's like separate.
Sheraton.
I don't know. Is it Sheraton KD? It could be Sheraton KD. We could be all saying it wrong. And he leaves so many comments as well. So sorry to him for all the different times. Hey, here's a comment we have to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, such a cool hat, Jarrod. I know it says hate, but such a cool hat, Jarrod. Should be available for purchase.
I'm hoping he means hat here. There it is. It is Sheraton KD. Beautiful. At least we know how to do that in the future. We got this hat made recently. We've been, you might have seen with Good Errors, we've been trying to get the logo, to the style that we want. This is it's a lot of it is about branding. We're doing all this on our own, so it's not as if we have many different people. Is that? I didn't even realize that. It is a cool hat though. I don't care if it's Bayram. It's still a cool hat, and he's right. Why is his name? Oh, anyway, I'm not going to ask him the question. But we are looking at getting these, at getting some merchandise and everything out eventually around the hat and the logo. So if you are interested in it, stay tuned. Estelle doesn't have one yet. This is the only hat. There's only 2 things we have. We have the hat, and we have like this little free sample that they gave me are the only two things we have. But we will start
What
to
is
get
that?
some stuff out there. It's like, so you have, this is like embroidered, right?
Okay.
And so they have to do it's actually, this is so boring, but it's a fascinating process because it's very hard when you're making, so we just made a logo. So if you see the logo on the screen at the moment, the Good Areas one on the Good Areas Live in the middle here, he's trying to point to it in the worst possible way. This one, right? When we tried to get that embroidered, there's so many little designs on it, it doesn't actually embroider very well. So we had to redesign our entire logo to make sure that it was something that was embroiderable, right? Then you got all the fingers are not particularly easy to embroider. And then it has to be something that can be flipped because it has to be light going onto dark and dark onto... Well, we had no idea about any of this. We've never done any of this before, of course. So we've ended up with this logo. We've got a couple of different versions. We will certainly... we'll certainly be looking at doing that sort of stuff going ahead in the future. But for those who don't know, I'm just having a look at the comments. Bayram said, this is Lance Gibbs. It's not Lance Gibbs. Lance Gibbs is one of the other logos that we played with, but it didn't quite work out as well as we wanted. This is Jack Iverson, who was the original carrom bowler back in the 1960s. And it's a great cricket photo. It's a creepy looking hand. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Gideon Haigh wrote an entire book about Jack Iverson because his local corner shop or maybe his fish and chip shop had a poster just of the hand holding the ball. And I've always been captivated by I love photos of finger spinners holding cricket balls because their hands are so ridiculous. Like, have you ever met, like, I'm trying to think of who you would have met with a big hand. I'm trying to think if any of the Sri Lankan bowlers have big hands. Because I don't think Rangana has. But guys like Daniel Vittori and Ashley Giles. Ashley Giles once tousled my hair. And it honestly felt, you know, those big comic hands that they have in America when they go to like sporting events? It felt like that was happening on my head. Like someone had put like 3 stakes on my head and were tussling my hair. And with Monty Panasas, I always forget when I see him and I shake his hand, I always forget that I'm going to lose my hand for a minute. It's just going to evaporate. Like I'm suddenly 12 years old and I'm shaking an adult's hand. So there's these great photos of finger spinners and there's some of the older ones as well, you know, with the old photography and everything. They just look absolutely incredible. So we were looking for something that was very Good Areas, right? That was something that sort of suited us. And I think a creepy hand holding a cricket ball is kind of exactly up our thing. It's a historical reference, but as people in the chat are saying, like, there are also modern people who bowl the carrom ball as well. So it's quite a modern thing and an old thing all at the same time. But we will eventually try and get some content out, some products out and everything. That's a little bit further down. But yes, I'm glad finally someone mentioned the hat, even if it was someone who works for us.
Yeah, we can do a Crick Picks episode on the best hands in cricket or the biggest hands.
How do you measure a hand? Do you know about this? Do you know this is actually a very controversial thing of how you measure a hand? There is no one way of measuring hands. And I only know about this through the NFL because for years they would only take quarterbacks and everyone wanted a quarterback with a big hand because quarterbacks with big hands were better, apparently. But it turned out that they were all measuring hands in a different way. No one measured it in exactly the same way. And so the whole thing was pointless and it didn't matter anyway. So there you go.
Okay, so on that note, I think we can wrap up this this podcast episode. If you missed the beginning, we were talking about the women's FTP. You can
we've only been talking about hands.
Hands. You can watch the whole video on the Good Areas YouTube channel as well. So a quick reminder to everyone listening or watching, you can go to goodareas.co to check out all the written content videos and other podcasts that we do. I'm sure Behram will be back in the next couple of days with something for you guys to watch.
You're going to have to host all the time now. Don't pretend that you're just coming in for one. This is it now. You've started hosting. You're another host. I want you to host Behram, and that he has to handle working with you.
I'm not going to do Behram's goodbye. I'm just going to say that's it from us today. We'll see you in the next one.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.